good. Welcome to another session of C programming. It's been a while since I uploaded. I was busy taking care of some things. So anyway, hope we have been going through the previous lectures and we understand everything that is going on so far. So in this session, we'll be covering how to take user inputs in C programming. Right now, taking user input, is a very essential part of every program because your program needs data to work, and most of the times, or about half of the time, you'll be taking those data from the people using the software. Another way of taking input is to read data from a file, but that is for a later session. Okay, so let's go to our code blocks and see what we'll be doing today, right? So what we'll cover in this section, right, we'll talk about how input is taken in C, right? And then we'll look at another function called the scanf. So the way the printf was, we also have scanf. And we'll also look at how it works. We'll look at how to actually take inputs with scanf, or single input with scanf. Then we'll look at also taking multiple inputs with scanf. Let's start. Sorry. So anytime input is to be taken from a user, right, what happens is that once the computer is put into that input mode, in quotes, it is going to be scanning all its input devices to see which one has been pressed or clicked, right? So it's going to scan the keyboard, it's going to scan the mouse and any other device or input device that you've connected to it until you press something. So basically, that is the general way it works, not really the exact way. The exact way has to do with things called buffers and stuff, but let's not go into that in this session. So just think of it as when the computer is in the input mode, it would begin to look at or begin to query all the input devices to see which one has received an input from the user. Right? So basically that is how input is taken in C and generally any programming language or even software. Okay, so in C, the function that takes the input is called the scanf, right? Scanf. So while the printf prints out stuff to the screen, the scanf is used to take input. Agreed? Okay. So with the scanf, what it does is that because the keyboard is the primary input device of the computer, the scanf is tailored towards taking input from the keyboard. Agreed? Okay. So before any input is taken, right, input is data you are supplying to the computer or to your program. So in order to use it, what it needs to do is that you need to prepare a space for the data to be held. So before you even take the data, you have to make sure that there's a place that can store the data. Right? And from our previous videos, we know that anytime we want to store something in the computer, we use a variable. Agreed? Okay. So let's just start coding and then see how it goes. So we are going to create an integer variable, right, called maybe input container. So we have int. I'm not going to initialize it to anything because this is the container that is going to store whatever data comes. So even if I give it a value of say maybe 10 and I use the scanf to take a value of 20, 20 is just going to replace what this value is. So we leave it uninitialized for the most part of it, right? And then one thing you have to know about C, I've been saying this a lot, that C was one of the earliest languages that came out. So what happens is that C cannot automatically infer the data type of your input. For example, if I give you the number 40, automatically you can tell that it's an integer. If I tell you maybe 3.6, you can tell that it's a decimal value. If I give you Z, you know that it's a character, right? But C cannot do that. There higher programming languages can do that, but C in particular cannot. So anytime you want to take input, which we've seen that you can use the scanf to do, you have to first tell it what type of data it is expecting, and then the second part is where to store that data. Agreed? So anytime you use scanf, you have to give it, first of all, the data type. And then the second part of it is where to store the data. So this is the bit of how we use the scanf. When you use the scanf, don't forget, the first thing you have to give it is the data type it is expecting, and then where to store the data. So if the data type doesn't correct or it doesn't match the container that you're using, you may get undefined behavior. In other words, your program might behave strangely. For example, let's say you declare an integer variable like this, and then you go and tell it that it's expecting maybe a character. You might get weird results depending on the state of your PC. Okay, so don't forget, scanf, data type it's expecting, and then where to store the data so that you can use it later. So let's actually use it and then see what we are talking about. So we have scanf, right? So to tell it the data type is expecting, we use the format specifiers or placeholders that we saw in the previous videos, right? So the format specifier tells it what type of data it's expecting. So we have an integer container here, right? So correspondingly, I would have to use the format specifier of %d, because that is the format specifier for integers. So that's the first part of it, the data type is expecting. And now the second part is where it should store the data. So remember, we created this variable to actually contain the data we'll use. So we will use it over there, right? So you have to use the ampersand operator, and then we have the input container variable. Now you might be wondering what this ampersand operator does. So when you use the ampersand, right, ampersand before a variable tells the computer that you are looking at the location of this variable, not exactly the value, right? Ampersand is also called the address of. So one time you use it with a variable, let's say this var1, it's not going to retrieve the value of var1, but it's going to retrieve the memory location. So sorry about that. If input container has a value of 10, you use the ampersand operator, you are not going to get the value 10, but you are going to get the location in your computer's memory where this variable is stored at. So don't forget, it's not just input container, but you have to tell it the address at which it should go and store it. So that's the second part, where to store the data. The computer uses locations for that, not the values. So don't forget to bring the ampersand, else your program will crash actually on most PCs. So if you forget to bring it, you see that it will actually allow you to input, but immediately after that, either it starts behaving strangely or the program will just crash. And the brainstem might tell you that it stopped working. Okay. So let's run this and then see what we get, right? So if we run it, we can see a blinking cursor, right? So it is simply expecting the input. So anytime you use the scanf and it gets to that point, the program is going to wait for you to enter something and press enter before it will continue. Agreed? So we created an integer variable. So let's just input an integer 123 and press enter. You can see that the program has ended. I hope that's clear. So going back to our code. So it comes to line 23, runs the scanf. It will wait for you to enter or give an input. So the scanf waits for before it continues. So if you don't enter, the program will just wait there until whenever. Agreed? Okay, so let's make this a little more interactive. If you just run a program and then you see a blinking cursor, you might think that maybe the program is not working. So normally before we would use scanf, we have to tell the user that he's about to make an input, right? And anytime we want to print to the screen, we know that we use the printf function. So here we'll put something like enter. That means it's going to run this enter a number before we see this, so at least we have an indication that we are supposed to put in something there. Okay, cool. So now let's rerun this and then see what we get. So now you can see the enter a number, and it is now waiting for us to input or make an input. Okay, so if I input the integer again or any other integer, now, taking input is not particularly interesting unless you are doing something with the input. Agreed? So now that we've taken our input, let's just print out the value to see that it is actually getting assigned to the input container. Right? So we are going to print out the variable input container after we have made the input. So over here, we would do number you entered. Run this program, we will see enter a number, then it will wait for us to make an input, and then it will print out the number you entered. So running this, enter a number, right? So we enter 423, press enter. You can see that yes, indeed, the number we entered has been assigned to the input container variable. Let's run it again and then enter a different number to show that it is actually working for a number. So here we'll enter maybe 10,000. Press enter. Let's go back to our code. So we've seen how to take a single input, right? Because this one just takes one input, assigns it to the corresponding variable, and then moves on, right? So we've described how input is taken, that if the computer is in that mode, it will look at all the it will look for the suitable input device depending on whatever function you are using. Right? So the scanf primarily looks at the keyboard. We've seen the scanf and how it works. That the first thing that you have to tell it is the data type it's expecting using the placeholders. And then the second part is where we store the data using the input or the variable name, the address of. So don't forget the ampersand, that's the address of operator. And that is what we use to take the location of a variable in memory. Okay, we've also looked at taking input or single input using scanf, right? Okay. So I hope this makes sense. So you can use as many scanfs for as many things that you'd want, right? So I'm going to write a simple program that accepts, or we are going to write a simple program that accepts two numbers and then prints out the sum of those two numbers. So because we need two numbers, we will declare two variables. So let's just use integers for now. So int num1 and num2. So I've declared two variables, two integer variables, num1 and num2. Okay, so like what you saw earlier, so we have a printf, the data type, which is %d for integers, address of num1, Oh, sorry, this is a printf statement. Sorry, I thought I was doing the scanf. So here we'll just put in enter first number. After that, then we use the scanf. So the scanf, the data type, the address of even though we are using two scanners, each of them is still taking a single input. We'll come to how to take multiple inputs using the same scanf. After this, then we now compute the sum. So I can declare a third variable, int sum, which is equal to num1 plus num2. Get its math operations. That was the last video, the previous video that we did. Okay, and then I can now print out my result. So the sum, we'll just use %d here because we want to actually print out the numbers we entered. So the sum of this number and this number is the sum. So we have three placeholders in our printf. The first one is num1. So let's run this and then see what we get. So we have that enter the first number. So we'll put in 10. So when you press enter, it will now go and run the second printf, which says enter the second number. And now it is running the second scanf. Over here we'll enter maybe 25. So we know that 10 plus 25 is 35, right? So pressing enter, and we have it over there. So the sum of 10. So it has inserted the num1 over here, and then the num2, which is 25 over here, and then the final sum, which is 35 over here, right? So we've looked at a simple program that can do additions, right? So you might write a program that you want to compute whatever it is you want to compute. So let's look at the last topic for this video, how to take multiple inputs with the same scanf, right? So I'm going to comment all this out using a block comment. Remember how those work. So everything from line 31 to line 43 is also a comment. Okay. So now let's see how we take multiple inputs, right? So the program that we just wrote, we are going to rewrite it, but this time we are going to use one scanf to take the two inputs. So let's first of all declare variables. So int num1, again int or num2, and then sum. Agreed. So the printf followed by or separated by a comma. Now with using multiple or using the same scanf to take multiple inputs, let's see how we do that. So we have the scanf. By this time the data type, right, is going to be a format of how you expect the numbers to be written. So over here I wanted the user to type in the first number followed by a comma, followed by a second number, which are both integers, right? So I'll put in that same format in which I want the user to input as the data type for the scanf. So because we have an integer here, we'll start with a %d. And then we have a comma. So we also have comma here. And then another integer which is represented by %d. So you get whatever format you want the user to input in, you can input in using the placeholders as well. Over here, because I now have two variables or two placeholders, I will give it the locations of two variables. So ampersand num1. Whatever format you want, you put that same format, just using placeholders this time. and then you put in the locations of the corresponding variables, right? So with this one, if the user should just enter one number and press enter, it's actually going to skip what num2 should be, and it will give some random number to num2, as you saw already, because I haven't initialized num2 to anything. On line 45, we'll separate it with we'll end it with a semicolon. So now we'll run this again. So this time I'm going to print, we are going to actually compute the sum. So sum is equal to num1 plus num2. We'll do the printf statement again. I'll just copy what we have here. So the sum of percentage %d and percentage %d is the same, right? Okay, so let's run this and see. So looking at it, we see that we have the printf statement we have there. So now it is expecting that input format that we gave, right? So let's see what happens if I just enter one number and press enter. So I'll just put in 100. You can see that it didn't allow me to enter for the second number and gave it some random number, which in this case was 0, and then perform the addition and give me the result. So 100, 0. I'll rerun this program, this time giving it the correct format of the input we set. So let's say you wanted to add say 10 and 15, right? So 10 comma 15. So pressing enter, yes, you can see that that worked. So it's going according to the format that we gave it. Going to take each placeholder and place it in the corresponding variable. So that one goes to num1 and this goes to num2, right? So going back to our code, we can see that the value 10 is assigned to num1 and we get 10 here. Value 15 is also assigned to num2 and we get 15 over here. And then finally the sum is 25. So these examples that we've done them using integers, right? So if you'd want to do the same for floating point numbers, so let's say I wanted to use floats for these, right? So it's just a matter of changing the data type as well. So for floats, remember that we use %f, right? So over here, you cannot do something like this. This would work. This %.2f is a formatting placeholder, so it's specifically for printf, not for scanf. So in scanf, you just leave it as %f. You understand? And then we'll also change this to percentage. So over here, I can use 0.2 so that I get maybe only 2 decimal places. So I change this also, and this also. Right? So let's rerun this program for floating point numbers and then see what we get. So over here, I'm going to input 1.5, comma 2.5. So pressing enter, see that we have this. So the result of 1.5, 2 decimal places, and 2.5 is 4.0. Okay, cool. So let's recap what we've done in this video. So we've described how input is taken in C. We've seen the function for input, which is the scanf. We've seen also how it works. We've seen how to take single input with scanf, and then we've also seen how to take multiple inputs with scanf. So please, there are some things I might not cover here, but this video should give you a basic understanding to read further as to what scanf is. So after this video or in the next video, I can assume that you understand how scanf works, at least in a minimal way, to be able to use it effectively, right? So we've done taking inputs for this video, and from in later videos we'll be building up on what we've done so far. So if you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment area and I'll do well to respond to all of them. and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.